You've been lied to about what happens after death, not just by religion, but by reality itself. From the moment you were old enough to understand words, a story was given to you. It may have been spoken from a pulpit, whispered by a parent, taught in classrooms, or woven into the movies you watched at night. Heaven if you were good, hell if you were not. For some, there was an option of a second chance, reincarnation if you were lucky, or purgatory if you were not. The details might have shifted depending on where and how you grew up, but the core message was always the same. Death is an end, and what comes after is fixed, permanent, and completely out of your control. But what if none of that is true? What if death isn't a destination at all, but a passage, one so complex, so layered, that the neat, black and white stories you've been told barely scratch the surface? This isn't about belief. It's not about religion, or rejecting religion. This is about remembering something you already know deep inside, that the truth is far stranger, far bigger, and far more intricate than the scripts you've been handed. You're not here to follow a narrative. You're here to wake up from one. The heaven and hell binary has served as one of the most powerful psychological tools in human history. Think about it. Two final destinations, both eternal, both absolute. One promises endless bliss, the other, infinite suffering. That is the ultimate incentive and the ultimate deterrent, wrapped into one. In this model, your actions are not just moral choices, they are wagers with eternity. It's an elegant system, designed to keep you aligned with the structures that claim to hold the keys to the afterlife. But there's a problem. That binary collapses the moment you look beyond the boundaries of your own tradition. Across cultures, the afterlife is never just one place or one state. In ancient Egypt, the dead faced a journey through the Dua, a shadowy realm filled with trials, guardians, and gates. In Norse mythology, warriors might find themselves in Valhalla, but others in the same tribe might cross into hell, not as a punishment, but as a quieter, colder resting place. In the Tibetan tradition, the afterlife is a series of transitional states, bardos, where your own mind becomes the landscape you travel through. Even in early Christian mysticism, there were layers upon layers of heavens and realms, each with its own guardians and thresholds. The more you look, the more you realize that death has never been a simple binary. That neat split between eternal joy and eternal torment is a cultural simplification, a way of making the incomprehensible more manageable. But simplifying something doesn't make it true. Science hasn't done much better. For centuries, it either ignored the question or dismissed it entirely. When it did speak, it replaced heaven and hell with something equally final, oblivion. To the materialist worldview, you are nothing more than the product of your brain's electrical activity. When that activity stops, so do you. Your consciousness, your awareness, your sense of self, all of it vanishes like a candle snuffed out in the dark. But even here, cracks have formed in the narrative. Near-death experiences, verifiable accounts of consciousness during periods of clinical death, quantum theories of consciousness that suggest awareness may not be bound to the brain. All of these point to the possibility that the mind might not be as fragile or temporary as we've been taught. These accounts aren't proof in the scientific sense, but they are clues that refuse to be ignored. Culture adds its own layer to the confusion. Death has been turned into entertainment, a spectacle to be feared or glamorized depending on the story being told. Movies, television, books, they reinforce the most familiar images: the glowing tunnel, the robed figure waiting, the pearly gates or the fiery pit. Even the language we use shapes our perceptions. We lose people, as if they are gone forever. We pass away, as though slipping quietly out of existence. The very words you've been taught to use around death carry the assumptions of finality and separation. What's left is a strange paradox. We live in a world where everyone dies, yet we are given the shallowest, most incomplete explanations for what happens next. And perhaps that is by design. A mystery half solved is a mystery still controlled. If you only have part of the map, you'll keep returning to the same guides, the same institutions, the same storytellers. You'll trust them because they claim to know the way. But the truth is that death is not hiding in distant temples or sealed laboratories. It's hiding in plain sight. It's in the shared experiences of those who have been to the edge and returned. It's in the parallels between ancient myth and modern accounts, It's in the quiet, intuitive knowing you sometimes feel when you stare too long at the night sky, or when you dream of people you've loved and lost. The clues are everywhere, scattered across time and culture, waiting for you to connect them. Once you start looking beyond the official stories, a different picture begins to emerge. One where death is not an endpoint, but a threshold, not a single path, but a spectrum of possibilities. Some of those paths may look familiar: the paradise, the judgment, the reunion. Others may be stranger than anything you've been prepared for, realms shaped by thought, layers of reality stacked like invisible worlds within worlds, or cycles of return you've walked countless times without remembering. And here is the most unsettling part. In many of these accounts, what happens after death is not entirely outside your influence. Awareness matters, intention matters. The state of your mind at the moment of death can determine which doorway you walk through, or if you even see the other doorways at all. That's not the kind of thing you're told in Sunday school or science class, because it shifts the responsibility back to you. If you've ever felt like the standard explanations didn't quite add up, you're not imagining it. The neat boxes, the final verdicts, the promises of certainty, they were never meant to answer your questions fully. They were meant to give you just enough to stop you from asking more. But asking more is exactly what you must do. Because the moment you accept that the afterlife is more than a binary, more than a shutdown, more than a story you were told, you start to remember something that can't be put into words, only experienced. And that's where the journey begins. The journey into what really happens after you take your final breath. The journey into the layers of reality that have been hidden, distorted, or denied. The journey into the map they never wanted you to find. When that moment comes, and it will come, the script you've been handed will dissolve, the rules you were told to follow will fade. And all that will matter is how awake you are when you take that first step beyond. You can cling to the stories you've been told, or you can step into the mystery prepared to see it for yourself. That choice begins now, long before the heartbeat stops, long before the last breath escapes. Because death isn't something that just happens to you, it's the next chapter of the story you're writing right now. They told you that when you die, you should go toward the light. They whispered it in religious stories, in near-death experience accounts, and in the endings of almost every film that dared to touch the subject of death. A warm glow, welcoming and pure, calling you home. It sounds beautiful, safe, and comforting, and that's exactly the point. But what if I told you that this light might not be your salvation at all? What if it's a carefully crafted lure, designed not to free you, but to send you right back into the very cycle you've been trying to escape? The Gnostic traditions, among others, warned about this long before modern storytelling ever romanticized it. They spoke of a false creator, the demiurge, an architect of illusion who built a layered reality not to liberate the soul, but to keep it tethered. According to these ancient teachings, the physical world is not the pinnacle of creation, but a kind of spiritual prison. You are not held here with chains of metal, but with chains of perception, illusions so convincing that you mistake them for truth. And in that vision, the light at the end of the tunnel is not the gateway to heaven, but the bait of a spiritual trap. Imagine this: you die, the body slips away like an old coat, and your awareness begins to expand. At first, there's disorientation, then, a brilliance appears. It feels like the ultimate homecoming, a pull in your chest that feels loving and irresistible. But, in the great reincarnation trap theory, this is not the true source. It's a frequency beacon, designed to match the deepest vibrations of longing you carry, drawing you in without question. The moment you step fully into that light, the process begins. Your memories are stripped, your sense of identity dissolves. Everything you learned, every lesson you fought for in your last life, erased in a flash. And then, you are born again. In a hospital, or a small home, crying into the air of a new world. You don't remember the light, you don't remember the choice. You don't remember that it even was a choice. All you know is this new name, this new set of circumstances, and the strange feeling that something is missing. You've been rebooted, sent back into the physical matrix without the awareness of who you were before. The theory goes further. It says that there are entities, just outside the edges of human perception, who benefit from this cycle. They do not need to enslave you physically. They harvest something much more subtle and much more valuable: your emotional energy. Every moment of grief, of joy, of rage, of love, releases a kind of vibrational currency, and in this model, they feed on it. That is why the light is made so alluring. It keeps you coming back willingly, over and over again, as a compliant participant in a system that was never designed for your liberation. In this vision, Earth becomes a kind of farm, not for bodies, but for consciousness. A place where souls are recycled through lifetimes, kept unaware of the bigger picture, so they can be mined for energy without resistance. The trap is not just the light, but the belief systems that prepare you for it long before you die. From early childhood, you are told to trust authority, to accept stories without question, to believe that safety lies in doing what you are told. By the time you leave this body, the programming runs so deep that walking toward the light feels like the only option. But if this is true, then what's the alternative? This is where the theory gets both empowering and unsettling. Those who speak of escaping the reincarnation trap say it begins with awareness, the kind you practice now, while you are still alive. When the body starts to fail, and the transition begins, you will still have a choice. The light is only one path. If you refuse it, if you hold your ground and turn your attention inward rather than outward, other possibilities begin to emerge. Some accounts describe these alternatives as doorways, different frequencies, different exits from the illusion. Some say you might find yourself in vast open space, or in realms that feel more like pure consciousness than any place you've known. But here's the challenge. The moment of death is also the moment when you are most vulnerable to confusion. Without practice, your awareness will be pulled toward the most familiar sensation, and that is almost always the light. So the work, according to this view, is to strengthen your ability to hold focus beyond the body, to train yourself not to react automatically, but to observe. Meditation, lucid dreaming, and deep self-inquiry become more than just spiritual hobbies, they are rehearsals for the ultimate test. Because if you can remain conscious as you cross the threshold, you can see the light for what it is and choose differently. You can bypass the memory wipe. You can step outside the wheel. It's important to understand that in this theory, the trap isn't evil in the way we usually define evil. It's not about punishment or vengeance. It's about utility. A system designed for self-preservation will do whatever it needs to keep its resources flowing. You are the resource. And the illusion of free will is part of the brilliance of the design. If you walk into the trap willingly, you won't rebel. You'll even call it salvation. But imagine what happens if enough people wake up. Imagine what happens if, at the moment of death, you refuse the light and hold your own frequency. If you bypass the recycling process, you reclaim not just your freedom, but the full continuity of your consciousness. No amnesia, no reset. You remember everything, every lifetime, every choice, every lesson. The illusion of separateness begins to dissolve, and you see the larger game for what it is. Of course, from the perspective of the trap, this is dangerous. The more who escape, the weaker the system becomes. That might be why such ideas are dismissed, mocked, or buried under layers of superstition. Not because they are ridiculous, but because they are effective. If you knew the light was a lure, you might hesitate, and hesitation could lead to awareness. Awareness is the one thing the system cannot control. The great reincarnation trap theory is not about making you fear death, it's about making you question it. It's about seeing the programming for what it is, so that when your time comes, you are not just a passenger on the ride. You are the one holding the map. And in that moment, you might remember that you are more than a body, more than a soul in transit. You are the awareness itself, and no light, however bright, can hold you unless you choose it. If that's true, then death is not the end of the story. It's the moment you decide whether you want to keep reading the same chapter, or finally open a different book entirely. When you die, it may not feel like going anywhere at all. Not in the way you've been taught to imagine. There is no dramatic departure into the sky, no sudden plummet into a hidden realm beneath your feet. Instead, it's more like changing the station on a radio. One moment you are tuned into the dense, physical frequency of the world you've known since birth. The next, the dial shifts, and you find yourself in a reality made of subtler currents, invisible while you were alive, yet surrounding you the entire time. In this view, death isn't an escape from reality but a change in the layer you're experiencing. The physical world, with its solid walls and heavy gravity, is just the lowest octave in a vast spectrum of existence. Above it, or rather, within and around it, are other planes of being, each vibrating at a slightly different frequency. The first of these is the etheric plane, which mirrors the physical so closely that for many, the initial moments after death feel confusing. You might still see the same room, the same streets, the same people moving around you, but there's something different, a lightness, an absence of the pull you once felt toward the body you inhabited. The etheric is the energetic double of the material world, a thin membrane between the physical and the realms beyond. It's here that the newly departed sometimes linger. Some don't even realize they've crossed over, staying near familiar places out of habit or emotional attachment. Others cling to unfinished business, reluctant to let go. The etheric is close enough to the physical that strong emotions, grief, longing, resentment, can keep a soul tethered to it for a while. But the etheric dissolves quickly, and whether you cling or not, you are eventually drawn deeper. That's when the astral plane opens up before you. The astral is unlike anything the physical mind can fully imagine because it is reactive to thought and charged by emotion. Here, you are no longer simply a witness to your environment, you are a co-creator. Every fear, desire, belief, and memory radiates outward and shapes the reality around you. It's as if the walls between your inner world and the outer world have dissolved, leaving nothing but a seamless projection of your consciousness. For some, the astral begins as a paradise, fields of light, cities shimmering with impossible architecture, reunions with loved ones who seem as real as they ever did in life. The joy and beauty here can feel infinite, but they are not permanent fixtures. They are reflections, born from the resonance of your own heart and mind. For others, the astral can take a darker form. If you carry fear, guilt, or unresolved pain, the landscape might twist into shadows. You might encounter places and beings that terrify you, but even these are not punishments in the moral sense. They are feedback, mirrors, showing you the parts of yourself you've avoided. In the astral, there is no external judge handing down sentences. There are no fixed heavens or hells, imposed by an outside authority. Instead, the realm itself acts as a mirror, reflecting your inner state with flawless precision. You are surrounded by the truth of what you are in that moment, and it can be both beautiful and unsettling. The more you shift your consciousness, the more the environment changes to match it. Clarity acts as a compass here, pointing you toward balance and peace. Intention becomes your armor, guiding the form and flow of what you experience. Beyond the astral lies the mental plane, where the reactive nature of the astral begins to dissolve. Here, emotion fades, and thought takes on a more abstract, structured form. In the mental plane, you're not creating landscapes in the same way. Instead, you're encountering the archetypes and blueprints that underpin all realities. It's like stepping backstage after a play and seeing the scaffolding, the set designs, the script pages that were once hidden from view. This is the architecture of consciousness stripped of the noise of personal emotion. From the mental plane, awareness can move into the causal plane, sometimes called the devachanic or spiritual plane. Here, the boundaries between self and higher self grow thin. Many describe this as a place of profound clarity, where the patterns of your lifetimes unfold before you in perfect sequence. You may review the journey you've taken, not in judgment, but in understanding. This is where many decide whether to return for another incarnation, to rest in the higher realms, or to dissolve into an even greater field of being. Not everyone passes smoothly through these planes. Some remain in the astral for long periods, looping through self-created realities until they gain the insight needed to move on. Others drift, untethered and aimless, pulled back toward the physical by unresolved attachments or familiar vibrations. This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize preparation for death. It's not about rituals or superstition, it's about clarity. Because without clarity, you're not navigating these planes, you're being tossed around by them. The astral is the most widely described of these realms, and for good reason. It is the crossroads where most souls spend significant time after death. It's also the easiest to reach while still alive through dreams, meditation, and astral projection. You've likely touched it without realizing, in lucid dreams that felt more real than waking life, in visions that carried emotions so intense, it shaped the scene around you. These are glimpses into the same layer of reality you will encounter more fully when your physical body is gone. And because the astral is a mirror, it offers an extraordinary opportunity. By working on your mind and heart now, you are shaping the environment you'll experience later. Every moment of self-awareness, every shadow you face, every fear you dissolve, rewires the landscapes you will walk through when you step beyond the physical. This is why the astral isn't a trap unless you make it one. It's not a reward system, but a training ground. It responds to you, and in doing so, teaches you who you really are. In the physical world, it's easy to hide from yourself. You can distract, deny, numb, and avoid. But in the astral, there's nowhere to hide. What you carry within you is what you will walk through, and that's not meant to be a threat, it's meant to be a gift. Because if consciousness is the sculptor, you are not a victim of the afterlife. You are the architect. By the time you leave the astral behind, you will know yourself in a way that life rarely makes possible. You will understand why you've lived the lives you have, why certain people and places called to you, and why certain patterns repeated until you broke them. Death, in this model, is not about losing your place in the world. It's about stepping into a greater world that was already there, waiting. And while the planes beyond the astral hold their own mysteries, it's here, in this mirror realm, that most souls learn the truths they need before they can move further. The astral doesn't care what you believed in life. It doesn't reward or punish according to doctrine. It simply shows you yourself, magnified, unfiltered, and immediate. When you understand that, the fear of judgment begins to dissolve. You see that the only judgment comes from your own resonance. You realize that preparing for death isn't about appeasing an outside power, but about aligning yourself with the truth of what you are. And that truth, once seen, can change everything, both in this life and beyond. They say that when you die, your life flashes before your eyes. Most people imagine it as a rapid replay, a highlight reel of moments, choices, and emotions from your personal point of view. But what if that description barely scratches the surface? What if, in that moment, you don't just remember your life, you become it again? Not just as yourself, but as every single person you ever touched. Every word you spoke, every glance you gave, every decision you made ripples back to you, and you feel it all from the other side. You experience your laughter as someone else received it. You feel the sting of your anger through the heart of the person who endured it. You live the joy you brought into someone's day, and you bear the weight of the pain you caused, no matter how small or unintentional. In this vision of the afterlife, this is not a judgment in the way you might have been taught. There is no robed figure sitting on a throne, no booming voice declaring your fate. There's no verdict of heaven or hell because the review is not about reward or punishment, it's about resonance. Imagine reality as a vast, infinite field of vibration. Every thought, every word, every action sends out a frequency into that field. It doesn't vanish, it doesn't fade, it travels, echoes, and eventually finds its way back to the source, to you. The life review is that return, condensed into an instant so pure and undeniable that it bypasses all your defenses. Karma, in this understanding, is not a cosmic system of justice keeping score. It's not about earning good points for kindness and bad points for cruelty. It's inertia, the natural momentum of energy. When you throw a stone into a still pond, the ripples move outward until they meet the edges and come back. In the same way, the energy you send out continues until it completes its loop. That loop might take seconds, years, or lifetimes, but eventually, the return arrives. You don't need a judge to tell you what was right or wrong, you feel it, with an intimacy that leaves no room for denial. The intensity of this experience can be shattering. It's not that you're condemned for the harm you caused, but you live it so vividly that you can no longer pretend it was meaningless. If you ignored someone's suffering, you feel their isolation as though it were your own. If you comforted someone in their darkest moment, you feel the warmth and relief blossom inside their chest. The life review reveals the truth about every choice you've ever made, not from the story you told yourself, but from the lived reality of those who shared the moment with you. And then comes the choice. This is where many accounts converge. After the life review, you're not pushed toward any particular path. Instead, you face the awareness of unfinished resonance. You see the knots you left untied, the wounds you left open, the patterns that still hum in the background of your being. They don't vanish simply because you've died. The frequencies you set in motion are still moving, and you feel their pull. For most souls, this pull leads them back to reincarnation. Not because someone forces them, but because they feel the incompleteness so deeply that returning becomes the only way to find harmony. This is why the life review is often described as both beautiful and difficult. It's beautiful because it strips away illusion. You finally see the pure truth of your life, without ego, without justification. It's difficult because in that truth, you recognize that much of what you thought was finished is still in motion. That argument you had years ago that you never resolved, that kindness you meant to offer but didn't, that self-sabotage you repeated lifetime after lifetime, it's all there. And until it's resolved, it remains part of your vibration. Karma, when seen this way, is simply the continuation of what you've set in motion. It's not a punishment, but an invitation, though not everyone experiences it that way. If you've lived in denial, the review can be overwhelming, because it confronts you with everything you've tried to avoid. But if you've lived with self-awareness, it can be liberating. You see the patterns, and you understand them without judgment. You realize that your life wasn't a series of random events, but a tapestry of energy weaving itself into shape through every choice you made. The possibility to transcend the cycle exists in every life review. When you see everything with perfect clarity, you also have the opportunity to let go, to release the inertia instead of carrying it forward. This requires something rare, complete acceptance. Acceptance of your light and your shadow, your triumphs and your failures, without clinging to pride or sinking into shame. If you can absorb the review without resistance, you can dissolve the need to return. You're not escaping responsibility, you're integrating it so fully that it no longer demands repetition. But most souls are not ready for that. The pull of unfinished resonance is strong, and the desire to make it right is almost irresistible. That's why reincarnation is so common in this view. It's not a sentence handed down from above, it's a self-chosen path to balance the vibrations you set into motion. And yet, the risk is always there. In returning, you might forget. You might get lost in the new life, in the distractions and illusions, and never quite complete what you came back to resolve. The cycle continues, not because it has to, but because you keep stepping into it with only part of the memory intact. This is why some teachings emphasize preparing for death while you are still alive. The more you cultivate awareness now, the more capable you will be of navigating the life review with clarity. Meditation, self-reflection, shadow work. These are not just practices for peace in life, but tools for freedom after death. They train you to look honestly at yourself, without turning away. They prepare you to face your own vibration without fear or distortion. If the great reincarnation trap theory warns you about false exits, the life review offers you a mirror so precise that you can't look anywhere else. It shows you not only what you've done, but why you did it, and the ripple effects that followed. It's not there to shame you. It's there to give you the most profound understanding you will ever have of yourself. In that understanding lies the choice: to return and continue shaping your vibration through action, or to integrate it so fully that the cycle no longer calls to you. When you imagine your own death, it's tempting to think only of the relief from the body, the end of struggle, the release of earthly concerns. But in this model, death is not an end. It's a shift into a dimension where the truth of your life stands unfiltered before you, and in that space, stripped of excuses and illusions, you will decide your next step. Will you return to the wheel, driven by the inertia of what remains unresolved? Or will you step off entirely, carrying with you the complete memory of everything you've been? The answer won't be decided for you. It will rise from the deepest resonance of your being, the echo of every choice you've ever made, calling you toward the path you've already set in motion. For as long as you can remember, you've been told that heaven and hell are destinations, final places where you either ascend or descend based on the sum of your life. Heaven, in most teachings, is painted as a realm of eternal bliss, where every tear is wiped away, pain ceases forever, and you are reunited with those you love. Hell, by contrast, is described as an unending prison of fire, despair, and separation, a punishment for choices deemed wrong. These ideas have shaped civilizations, inspired art, and controlled the behavior of billions. But what if both heaven and hell aren't places at all? What if they are states of consciousness, landscapes formed entirely by the mind and heart, as real and as solid as any place, yet created and sustained from within? When you look at heaven and hell through the lens of consciousness, the geography changes completely. Instead of fixed locations somewhere far away, they become mental and emotional environments that match the vibration you carry. Heaven is not a gated city floating in the clouds, it's the resonance of peace, joy, and deep alignment with truth. Hell is not a furnace underground, it's the resonance of fear, guilt, hatred, and despair, looping endlessly until something shifts inside you. Both are real experiences, but neither exists as a static, eternal place that traps you forever. They are states you can enter, inhabit, and eventually leave. The moment after death, your awareness gravitates toward what feels most familiar, most aligned with your inner state. If you've lived a life steeped in love, compassion, and inner harmony, your consciousness naturally expands into a realm that reflects those qualities. You might find yourself surrounded by beauty that defies description, embraced by an atmosphere of unconditional acceptance. This could be interpreted as heaven, and for you in that moment, it is heaven. On the other hand, if you've carried deep anger, unresolved wounds, or patterns of harm, your awareness may first settle into a reality shaped by those vibrations. The landscape might feel oppressive, dark, or hostile. This could be interpreted as hell. But here's the key: neither is a sentence imposed by an outside authority. They are mirrors of the inner world, projected outward into the fabric of consciousness itself. Across cultures, the afterlife has been depicted in countless forms, and when you examine them closely, you start to see the same underlying pattern. In Norse tradition, the warrior's heaven was Valhalla, a great hall where the honored dead feast, fight, and celebrate until the final battle. In Greek myth, the worthy souls found themselves in Elysium, a place of endless spring and ease. In Buddhism, the Pure Lands are realms of supreme clarity and opportunity for spiritual growth, free from the distractions and struggles of physical existence. In Hindu and Buddhist cosmology, Naraka is a place of suffering where karmic debts are experienced until they dissolve. These descriptions vary wildly in imagery, but they share a truth: they are environments that match the mental, emotional, and spiritual state of the person entering them. When you think of heaven and hell this way, permanence begins to dissolve. If these realms are states of consciousness, then they are as fluid as the mind itself. Just as you can shift from joy to grief in life, you can shift between realms in death. A soul that begins in a hell-like state can rise into a heaven-like one through transformation, healing, and release. A soul that begins in a blissful realm can descend into denser states if it becomes attached, distracted, or entangled in unresolved desires. Nothing is fixed because consciousness is never fixed. This is why some ancient teachings emphasized that heaven and hell are not rewards or punishments, but phases of experience. They are opportunities, one to deepen peace and unity, the other to confront and release the illusions that bind you. In this light, even the most terrifying hell becomes a place of profound potential. Here, the suffering is not meaningless torment, but a catalyst, pressing you to see what you have avoided. The fires are not literal flames, but the burning intensity of facing yourself without escape. The same is true for the states we call heaven. In those moments of pure bliss, you are surrounded by reflections of your highest self. The beauty, the harmony, the connection, they are your own consciousness expressing itself without limitation. And yet, even here, there is a call to move forward. Some traditions warn of becoming attached to the pleasures of heavenly states, mistaking them for the ultimate destination. Just as clinging to pain can keep you in a hell-like state, clinging to bliss can keep you from moving into even higher, more expansive layers of being. In this model, heaven and hell are closer than we've been taught to imagine. They are not separated by an unbridgeable gulf, but by the shift of a single thought, the release of a single burden, the awakening of a single insight. You carry the seeds of both within you right now. Moments of genuine kindness, forgiveness, and presence are glimpses of heaven. Moments of rage, despair, and self-condemnation are glimpses of hell. The afterlife magnifies these states because the external distractions of physical life are gone, leaving only the raw reflection of what you've cultivated within. The idea that no realm is permanent is both liberating and daunting. It means that no matter how lost you feel, there is always a way forward. It also means that no matter how comfortable you are, there is always further to go. It erases the notion of finality and replaces it with movement, growth, and transformation. In this sense, death is not the ultimate sorting of souls into two eternal camps. It is the continuation of the same inner work you've been doing, or avoiding, all along. When you begin to see heaven and hell as states of consciousness, a subtle but profound responsibility emerges. You are not passively awaiting a verdict, you are actively shaping the afterlife you will enter. Every choice you make, every emotion you nurture, every belief you hold, is building the landscapes you will walk through when your body is gone. And because nothing is permanent, you can begin changing those landscapes right now. This understanding can strip away the fear that often surrounds death. If there is no eternal damnation, there is no need to dread a mistake that can never be undone. If there is no final reward to cling to, there is no need to live in quiet desperation, trying to earn something that is already within you. Instead, life becomes about cultivating the states of being you wish to experience, knowing that death will simply amplify them. Imagine stepping beyond the body and finding yourself in a realm that feels like home, not because someone else built it for you, but because you've been building it all along. Imagine realizing that every time you practice compassion, you added light to its skies. Every time you forgave, you cleared space for beauty to grow. Every moment of gratitude planted seeds that now bloom in impossible colors. And if you step into a realm that feels heavy or shadowed, imagine realizing that you have the power to change it, to call in light, to open doors, to shift the frequency until it matches the truth of who you are. The teachings that reduce the afterlife to a permanent heaven or hell strip away this dynamic truth. They take a fluid, evolving process and freeze it into something rigid, turning a journey into a sentence. But the journey is far more intricate than that. You are not traveling to a fixed destination. You are moving through an ever-shifting landscape of consciousness, shaped by what you carry within you, transformed by every choice you make. And perhaps the most important thing to remember is that you've been there before, in dreams, in moments of deep meditation, in the unexplainable spaces between waking and sleeping. You've touched these states. You've walked their paths without knowing their names. Heaven and hell are not waiting for you at the end of life. They are here now, rising and falling within you. The afterlife simply makes them impossible to ignore. When that day comes, when the body falls away and the outer world fades, you will not be judged by a distant ruler. You will step into the reflection of your own consciousness, and it will embrace you like an old friend or challenge you like a relentless teacher. Either way, it will be you. And when you understand that, you realize that the work of preparing for the afterlife is the same as the work of living well now. Because in the end, the heaven you seek and the hell you fear are both inside you, and always have been. Imagine for a moment that everything you've ever known, the streets you've walked, the people you've loved, the body you call your own, is not the ultimate reality, but part of an intricate simulation. A program so vast and seamless that it convinces you it's real. In this view, death isn't the end of your existence. It's the moment you log out. The moment the headset comes off, and you realize you've been immersed in a hyper-realistic game that's been running far longer than you could have imagined. Your senses, your memories, your struggles, all experienced through an avatar designed for this realm. But the real you, the one who sees without eyes and thinks without a brain, has been outside the entire time. Near-death experiences become far more than spiritual visions in this model. They are system glitches, moments when the program momentarily falters, and you catch a glimpse of what lies beyond the code. People often describe them as feeling more real than real, vibrant colors, expanded senses, an overwhelming sense of knowing. That heightened clarity could be the raw perception of consciousness, unfiltered by the limitations of the simulation's hardware. In that suspended state between life and death, the game's graphics fade, and you briefly experience the operating system beneath it all. You may see structures of light, vast interconnected webs, or landscapes that shift and respond instantly to your thoughts. In those moments, the illusion of separation starts to dissolve, and you recognize that the world you've been navigating is not the source of your being, it's the interface. This theory challenges everything you've been told about identity. You are not the character you've been playing. You are not the accumulation of the body's habits, appearance, and history. You are the one holding the controller, existing outside of the rendered space. Consciousness is the true player, and the physical self is just the vehicle, an extraordinarily convincing avatar, loaded with its own backstory, preferences, and limitations. Just as a gamer might become so absorbed in a role that they momentarily forget who they are outside the game, you've been so deeply immersed in the simulation that you've mistaken the avatar for the self. The moment of death, then, is a moment of awakening. The screen fades, the connection severs, and you're left in the silence and clarity of the base reality. But here's where the theory gets unsettling. Just because you've logged out doesn't mean you're free. The simulation has its own ways of drawing you back in. And in the same way that a skilled game developer might lure a player into replaying by offering new challenges, rewards, or unfinished quests, the forces within this cosmic program might entice you to re-enter. The pull can be subtle or overwhelming. You might be shown scenes from your life, moments of beauty, connection, or desire that make you feel you have unfinished business. You might be given visions of loved ones still inside the simulation, stirring your longing to return and help them. Or you might be tempted by entirely new experiences, alternate versions of the game you haven't explored yet. Each one is an invitation to pick up the controller again, to load a new character, to dive back into the story. If the reincarnation trap theory warns about the false light, the simulation hypothesis warns about the false choice. It tells you that the game is designed to keep you engaged, to give you reasons to respawn over and over, because without players, the simulation loses purpose. Whether this is the design of some higher intelligence, a self-running system, or an agreement you made before entering, is a matter of debate. What's consistent is the idea that once you're inside, the immersion is so total that you forget the truth. When near-death experiencers report being told, "It's not your time," this theory suggests it may not be an objective fact, but an instruction from the system, or from those who maintain it, to keep you playing. Glimpsing the code doesn't necessarily mean you're allowed to leave it permanently. Many come back with heightened awareness, yes, but also with the same amnesia about the true nature of the player. That amnesia is essential to the game's design. After all, if you remembered that none of this was ultimately real, how invested would you be in its dramas? How motivated would you be to fight, love, strive, and survive in the ways the simulation requires? Breaking free from the simulation is not about rejecting the world or denying its beauty. It's about recognizing it for what it is, a crafted environment with rules, physics, and narratives that are immersive but not absolute. The risks of being pulled back in lie in your attachments. Every unhealed wound, every unresolved desire, every lingering fear becomes an anchor. They can be used to draw you back into another round, another identity, another cycle of forgetting and remembering. Those who study this model often point to lucid dreaming as a training ground. In a lucid dream, you recognize the environment as unreal, yet you can still navigate it with clarity and purpose. You can alter it, explore it, even choose to leave it. This skill mirrors the awareness needed at death, to see the simulation for what it is without being seduced by it. Meditation, too, serves as a kind of debug mode, stripping away layers of programming so you can connect with the player rather than the avatar. But the real challenge comes in the moment of transition. When the program begins to shut down for your character, Will you cling to its story, or will you return fully to the one who has been observing from beyond? The simulation hypothesis doesn't frame this as a battle of good and evil, but as a matter of sovereignty. The game itself may not be malicious. It could even be a place for learning, exploration, and creativity. But if you're unaware that you're in it, your choices aren't truly your own. The idea that consciousness is the player changes everything about how you approach life and death. If you are the one outside the simulation, then nothing that happens here can diminish you. Pain, loss, and even the dissolution of the body are experiences for the avatar, not the player. The player remains untouched. But forgetting this truth means living and dying as if the stakes were absolute, as if losing the game means losing yourself. That's the hook that keeps you coming back. If you can hold the awareness that you are the player, not the character, then death becomes less about fear and more about choice. Do you want to log in again, knowing what you now know? Do you want to explore a new world, a new set of rules, a new story? Or do you want to remain in the base reality, to rest, to create something entirely different outside the confines of the simulation? The decision is yours, but only if you recognize it as a decision at all. In this model, the most dangerous thing is not the simulation itself, but the forgetting. If you log out and immediately get drawn back in without remembering you've done this countless times before, the cycle continues indefinitely. That's why some traditions speak of dying before you die, awakening to your true nature while still inside the game, so that when the time comes to exit, you do so with full awareness. Without that, you risk becoming just another respawn, another character in a long series of roles, each one feeling like the only life you've ever had. The simulation hypothesis Afterlife doesn't demand you reject the world you see. It invites you to see it as both real and unreal, meaningful in the moment, but ultimately part of a larger construct. And in the space between logging out and logging back in, it challenges you to ask the most important question of all. Now that you remember who you really are, what will you choose to do next? Imagine taking your last breath and finding yourself not in an alien world or a vast, empty void, but standing among familiar faces. Some you knew well, others you recognize from faded photographs or whispered stories. The moment is overwhelming, not because you've arrived in a strange place, but because it feels like coming home. This is the essence of the ancestral realm theory, the idea that when you die, you return to the company of those who walked before you, stepping into a lineage that is alive and aware beyond the physical world. Across countless cultures, this vision of the afterlife is not just a comforting possibility, but a central truth woven into spiritual practice. In many African traditions, the dead are not gone. They are active participants in the lives of the living, protectors, and advisors, who bridge the gap between the material and spiritual worlds. The Zulu speak of the Amadlozi, the ancestors who watch over families, offering guidance and warnings through dreams, intuition, and signs. Among the Akan of Ghana, the living and the dead form a single community, bound together in an ongoing exchange of respect, offerings, and blessings. In these traditions, to honor your ancestors is not merely a symbolic act, it is to strengthen an ongoing relationship with living forces who happen to dwell in a realm you cannot see with physical eyes. Indigenous peoples around the world carry similar threads in their understanding of life and death. In many Native American traditions, the afterlife is not a distant kingdom, but an extension of the land, a continuation of the community. The ancestors walk alongside the living, present in the wind, the rivers, the animals. They are called upon in ceremonies, not as deities, but as family, wise elders who carry the memory of the people. To them, the dead do not vanish into a separate world but remain intertwined with this one, influencing its flow in ways subtle and profound. Shamanic traditions across Siberia, the Amazon, and other regions speak of the dead as active participants in the soul's journey. In the shaman's vision, the afterlife is not a place of permanent separation but a network of realms connected by pathways of spirit. Shamans travel these pathways in trance, guided by animal spirits and, often, by the ancestors themselves. These journeys are undertaken for healing, guidance, and the restoration of balance, acts that reaffirm the deep bond between the living and the dead. In this worldview, The ancestral realm is both destination and crossroads, a space where souls gather, exchange wisdom, and from which they may even return to physical life. The ancestral realm theory does not view death as a disappearance, but as a transition into a role of greater perspective. Freed from the limitations of the body, the ancestors can see further, not bound by the narrow timelines that constrain the living. They may guide their descendants away from danger, nudge them toward opportunities, or plant ideas in the mind at moments when clarity is needed most. The guidance can be subtle, a sudden thought, a chance encounter, a dream that lingers long after waking. For those attuned to the relationship, these moments are recognized for what they are: the voice of the lineage speaking through the fabric of daily life. In many ways, this theory overlaps with the descriptions of the etheric and astral realms. The etheric plane, so close to the physical world, is often described as the place where spirits linger after death, still able to interact with the living in limited ways. The astral, with its fluid landscapes shaped by thought and emotion, could easily accommodate a communal realm built from the shared memories and bonds of a family or tribe. If consciousness shapes environment, then an ancestral realm could be a collective creation, sustained by the shared attention, love, and respect of those on both sides of the veil. What makes the ancestral realm distinct from other afterlife concepts is its focus on continuity. Here, identity is not dissolved into a formless field, nor is it confined to solitary self-reflection. Instead, you remain part of a web, a chain of lives stretching backward and forward through time. Each link in that chain draws strength from the others. You inherit wisdom, resilience, and sometimes burdens from those before you, and you pass on your own legacy to those who will come after. Death simply moves you to a different place in the circle, where your role shifts from traveler to guide. In some traditions, the ancestral realm is also a place of preparation. Souls gather there not only to watch over their descendants, but to ready themselves for another life. They may discuss lessons learned, share insights with others in the lineage, and choose the circumstances of their return. This is not a decision made in isolation, it is a collective act, ensuring that the experiences of one generation strengthen the next. In this way, reincarnation is not just an individual cycle but a shared family endeavor, weaving the same souls together in different patterns over time. There is also the understanding that not all ancestors are benevolent, at least not in the beginning. In some African and indigenous beliefs, troubled spirits, those who died with unresolved anger, fear, or shame, may cause disturbances among the living. These are not seen as demons in the conventional sense, but as members of the family who are still caught in their own struggles. Rituals of cleansing, forgiveness, and remembrance are used to help such spirits find peace and rejoin the community in the ancestral realm. This reinforces the idea that the dead, like the living, are works in progress, continuing to grow and change. From a consciousness perspective, the ancestral realm could be seen as a shared frequency, a wavelength where members of the same soul group gather because they are attuned to each other. Just as you might find comfort in a room filled with loved ones in life, your consciousness might gravitate toward that same sense of familiarity in death. If the astral plane responds to thought and emotion, then the deep bonds of family and tribe could naturally draw souls together, shaping a common space that feels like home. For many who have experienced near-death states or visions during profound grief, the idea of the ancestral realm resonates on a personal level. Stories abound of people meeting long-departed relatives during these moments, receiving messages of comfort or insight before returning to life. While skeptics may dismiss these as hallucinations, the consistency of such accounts across cultures and centuries suggests something more than chance. These encounters often leave the experiencer with a profound sense of connection, a certainty that their loved ones are not lost but simply existing in another layer of reality. The ancestral realm theory carries with it a quiet challenge. If the dead remain aware of the living, if they are still connected to your choices and actions, then how you live becomes part of a larger story. Your struggles, triumphs, and transformations do not end with you. They ripple backward and forward through the lineage, influencing those who came before and those who have yet to come. In this way, Healing yourself can be an act of healing for the entire ancestral line, just as honoring the wisdom of your ancestors can strengthen the foundation for those who will follow. And perhaps most importantly, the ancestral realm reframes death, not as a severing, but as a return. It suggests that when the time comes, you will not step into darkness alone. You will step into a circle that has been waiting for you since before you were born, filled with faces that smile in recognition, arms that open in welcome, and voices that speak your name as if no time has passed at all. It is the homecoming that reminds you that you were never truly separate, that you have always been part of something vast, ancient, and alive, both here and beyond. What if dying doesn't mean leaving existence at all, but simply stepping sideways into another version of it? In the parallel universe crossover theory, death isn't an ending but a shift, a transition from one branch of reality into another, where you continue living, but under slightly altered conditions. It's not reincarnation in the traditional sense, because you don't start over as a child. Instead, you awaken in a timeline that diverged from the one you just left, a parallel dimension where the differences might be so subtle you don't notice them at first, or so extreme that you instantly realize something has changed. This idea draws heavily from the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics, which suggests that every decision, every event, causes reality to split into countless possibilities. According to this view, all versions of you that could exist do exist, each living in its own branch of the universal tree. The theory of quantum immortality takes it a step further. It proposes that your consciousness will never experience its own non-existence. If you die in one branch, your awareness simply continues in another where you survived. In this framework, you can't truly die, you can only shift. The body in the original reality may perish, but the awareness inhabiting it carries on, seamlessly sliding into the closest viable version where it's still alive. For some, this theory explains why certain near-death experiences feel less like visions of an afterlife, and more like waking up in a slightly different world. People report coming back with the unshakable feeling that something is off. Small details about their surroundings have changed, memories don't align perfectly with those of others, or even aspects of their own history feel subtly rewritten. Imagine collapsing from a heart attack and, in what feels like a blink, waking up in a hospital bed surrounded by familiar faces. Everything seems normal, but your wedding ring is on a different finger, or the family photo on the table shows a moment you don't remember living. In this model, you didn't return to the exact same reality you left, you crossed into one where you survived, and in the process, you inherited the version of you that already existed there. This raises profound questions about identity. If there are countless versions of you, each living out different possibilities, which one is the real you? The parallel universe crossover theory suggests they all are. Consciousness isn't bound to a single timeline. It's the thread connecting them. Your sense of self in any given moment is like a bead on a necklace, but the string runs through every bead across every dimension. Death, in this view, is not the loss of the self but a relocation. You step into another bead, another reality, and the story continues. But the continuity isn't always perfect. Just as moving between rooms with different lighting changes the way you see the objects inside, moving between universes can subtly alter your perception and memory. You might carry with you fragments of your previous life, flashes of moments that no one else remembers, or an inexplicable sense of déjà vu that feels less like familiarity and more like remembering something from a place you no longer inhabit. These overlaps can be unsettling, leading people to question their sanity or assume they imagine the differences. In truth, the dissonance could be the residue of shifting realities. If this theory is true, it means that you have already died countless times without realizing it. Each time you faced a fatal moment, a car crash, a fall, an illness, you may have shifted into a version of reality where you lived through it. The memory of the danger remains, but the version of events in your current universe is the one where you survived. To you, it feels like a close call. To the branch you left behind, it was the end of your story there. This perspective changes how you think about mortality. Instead of a single linear life ending in a final moment, your existence becomes an endless branching of possibilities. You might never encounter a definitive ending from your own point of view. Instead, you simply move from one branch to another, from one version of Earth to the next. But that also means you're constantly leaving behind versions of your loved ones in timelines where you didn't make it. They grieve you there, even as you continue on here. The same is true in reverse. You've grieved people in your life who may, in some other branch, still be alive and walking under the same sun. Some near-death accounts fit this framework perfectly. People describe leaving their bodies and traveling through a place that wasn't a tunnel of light, but a different version of Earth altogether, streets that looked familiar yet somehow wrong, skies with colors they'd never seen before, or meeting people who knew them intimately but whose faces they couldn't place. These aren't descriptions of traditional heavens or hells, but of alternative realities that feel as tangible as the one they left. For those who return, the experience can be deeply disorienting, as if they've been given a glimpse into an infinite archive of worlds, all just a breath away from their own. The implications of this are staggering. If death is merely a shift, then the afterlife is not a single destination but an endless array of alternative lives. The concept of a final resting place disappears, replaced by an eternal journey through parallel versions of existence. Your identity becomes fluid, a traveler's consciousness wearing different lives like changing clothes. Memory, too, becomes unreliable, not because it fades with time, but because it rewrites itself to fit the reality you now occupy. The memories you carry might belong partly to the you that existed here before you arrived, blending with the experiences you brought from the version of reality you left. This also means that the boundaries between life and death are less absolute than we've been taught. If you can cross into another world at the moment of death, could you do it consciously? Could you choose the version you enter, rather than sliding into the closest match by default? Some suggest that with enough awareness, you could navigate these transitions intentionally, selecting the reality that best serves your growth, peace, or purpose. But that requires breaking the habit of passive crossing, learning to recognize the moment of shift, to stay conscious as the old reality dissolves, and to steer toward the new one. Without that awareness, you simply drift, carried by the inertia of probability, into whichever branch aligns most closely with the moment of your departure. The parallel universe crossover theory reframes the fear of death entirely. Instead of fearing the end, you might begin to fear losing your bearings, forgetting that you've crossed, forgetting that other versions of you are out there, and slipping deeper into the illusion that the reality in front of you is the only one that exists. The danger isn't in dying, but in becoming so absorbed in the new branch that you forget you've ever walked others. That forgetting can make each shift feel like a birth into a brand new story, complete with all the limitations of believing you are only what this particular reality says you are. And yet, there's something freeing in this view. If you are a traveler of worlds, then every ending is also a beginning. Every loss is a doorway. Every moment of death is also a moment of expansion into a reality you haven't yet explored. The you reading these words right now may not be the same you who started the day. You may have crossed a dozen times already, the shifts so seamless that you didn't notice. But deep down, there's a part of you, the part that moves between worlds, that remembers. That part is not bound to any one earth, any one body, or any one story. It's the constant in an infinite sea of change. And when your final moment in this version comes, you might just find yourself stepping into another, looking around, and realizing you've been here before, just not quite like this. There is a vision of the afterlife so different from the usual images of bright heavens, shadowed hells, or bustling spirit worlds, that it can feel almost unsettling. In this vision, there is no continuation of you, as you currently know yourself, no personality, no individual memory, no sense of I moving forward into another chapter. Instead, death is the final and complete surrender of individuality, the dissolving of every boundary, until what you are is indistinguishable from everything else. This is the dissolution into source, a view rooted in the ancient traditions of non-duality, where the self is revealed to be an illusion, and what remains is the pure, formless awareness that was always there beneath the surface. From the perspective of non-dual teachings, what you call you has never been separate from the whole. The sense of a distinct identity is a temporary construct, a ripple on the ocean, mistaking itself for the ocean's entirety. Birth is the moment the ripple appears, death is the moment it is reabsorbed, and in between, life is the dream in which the ripple imagines it has its own path, struggles, and destiny. When death comes, it is not a journey to another place but the end of the dream, the moment the imagined self releases its hold and the truth of unity is uncovered. In Advaita philosophy, this return is not a merging with something greater in the sense of two things becoming one, because there were never two to begin with. It is the recognition that the awareness experiencing your life now is the same awareness that exists everywhere, in all beings and in all forms. What dissolves is not the awareness itself, but the filter, the narrow lens of ego and personal story. When the body falls away and the mind grows silent, there is nothing left to sustain the illusion of separateness. What remains is the infinite, unbounded field that has no center and no edge. Buddhism offers a similar picture, especially in its more esoteric teachings. The concept of anatta, or no, self, strips away the idea of a permanent identity that moves from life to life. The self is seen as a collection of changing processes, sensations, thoughts, memories, habits, woven together so seamlessly that they appear solid. Death, in this view, is the unraveling of that weave. If the mind is trained to let go completely, what follows is not another incarnation or a trip through heavenly realms, but the direct realization of emptiness, the spacious, luminous reality that underlies all forms. Sufism, the mystical heart of Islam, speaks of a similar dissolution, though often in the language of love. Here, the soul is not losing itself into emptiness, but returning to the beloved, the divine source from which all life flows. The Sufi poet Rumi likened it to a drop of water falling into the ocean, no longer able to separate itself, yet somehow more itself than ever before. The identity that once felt so important melts away, and what is left is not a void but the fullness of God, in which all longing ends because the seeker and the sought are revealed to be one. In life, there are moments that mirror this final dissolution. Mystics, meditators, and even ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances have reported glimpses of it. A deep meditation that erases the boundaries of the body, a moment of awe in nature when the self seems to vanish, an experience of love so profound that there is no longer a distinction between giver and receiver. These are small rehearsals for the great dissolving that comes at death. Psychedelic experiences, near-death states, or intense spiritual practice can all trigger this same recognition, leaving behind a sense that the separate self is a fleeting illusion and that what you truly are is beyond birth and death. For the ego, this idea can be terrifying. The mind has been built to survive, to hold on, to keep the boundaries of me intact. To imagine those boundaries dissolving completely can feel like annihilation. But from the perspective of the awareness beyond the mind, nothing is lost. You do not cease to exist, you cease to exist as a fragment. You are no longer the drop worrying about its edges, because you are the ocean itself. The accounts from those who have approached this state in near-death experiences are often marked by the same qualities: an indescribable peace, a sense of boundlessness, the disappearance of time, and the absolute certainty that there is nothing outside of what they have become. Some speak of a light that is not merely seen but is identical to what they are. Others describe it as a vast field of knowing where every question is answered instantly, not in words but in direct understanding. The overwhelming emotion, if it can be called that, is often one of homecoming, not to a place, but to the truth of being. In this model, there is no reincarnation because there is no individual self to return. There is no heaven or hell because those require a you to inhabit them. There is only the unbroken, eternal reality that was there before your birth and will remain after your death. This is not a loss in the sense of something being taken away. It is a return to the fullness that can never be diminished. Even so, not every soul experiences this dissolution immediately upon death. Many pass through other realms first, guided by the momentum of their consciousness, still carrying traces of individuality. The dissolution into source can be delayed by attachment, by the pull of unfinished desires, or by the strength of identification with the self. But for those who are ready, whether through spiritual practice, deep surrender, or simply the natural ripening of lifetimes, the merging happens effortlessly. There is no journey to make because there is nowhere else to go. In a way, the dissolution into source is both the simplest and the most profound of all afterlife theories. It does not offer vivid landscapes, elaborate hierarchies, or detailed maps of post-death experience. It offers only this, the ending of the story of separation. And yet, for those who have touched even a fraction of that unity, it is enough. They speak of it not with fear, but with a kind of quiet awe, as if they have glimpsed the deepest truth of existence, and found it to be not cold or empty, but infinite and alive. If you look closely, you will see that life itself is always pointing you toward this. Every attachment you release, every moment you step out of the endless commentary of the mind, every time you feel yourself as part of something larger than your personal story, you are practicing dissolution. You are loosening the grip of the self so that, when the final moment comes, you can fall into the ocean without hesitation. And when that moment comes, there will be no you to cross a threshold, no you to stand apart and witness. There will only be the vast, seamless reality that was always here, waiting patiently for the drop to remember that it was never separate from the ocean. In that instant, the search ends, the questions fade, and all that remains is the silent, luminous truth that is both your origin and your destiny. If you've ever wondered why life feels like an endless series of challenges, breakthroughs, and lessons, the Soul School theory offers a compelling answer. In this view, Earth is not just a random stage where human drama unfolds, it's a classroom for consciousness. Every moment, every relationship, every hardship is part of a curriculum designed to help you evolve beyond who you were yesterday. You are not here by accident. You are here because, at some deeper level of awareness, you chose to be. This life is your semester, your term, your course in the grand academy of existence. And just like in any school, your experiences are not meant to be purely comfortable. They are meant to stretch you, to test you, to reveal your strengths and expose your blind spots. In this framework, death is not an annihilation but a transition. When the body fails and you step beyond the veil, you don't vanish into nothingness. You review the work you've done. You look at the goals you set before you arrived, the progress you made, and the areas where you still have more to learn. Some see this moment as a kind of graduation. If you've completed the lessons you came for, you move on to another level of existence, perhaps a realm where the density of matter no longer limits you, where creation happens at the speed of thought. Others, however, realize they've left parts of the work unfinished. They've avoided certain challenges, repeated old patterns, or let fear keep them from stepping into their potential. For them, the choice is often re-enrollment, returning to another life, in another body, to try again. This model suggests that the lessons you face are rarely random. Before birth, you may have selected certain themes to focus on: compassion, patience, courage, self-love, forgiveness. You chose the circumstances, family, and cultural backdrop most likely to bring those lessons to the surface. That doesn't mean everything is predetermined. Free will is still at play. But the broad strokes of your life, the key challenges and opportunities, are like the major topics of a course syllabus. How you approach them, whether you engage fully or avoid them, determines how much you actually learn. The Soul School theory also emphasizes that lessons are carried between lives. The knowledge you gain doesn't vanish when you die. If you've cultivated resilience in one lifetime, you may be born with a natural strength in the next. If you've repeatedly avoided a certain lesson, you may find it appearing again and again, in different forms, until you finally face it. In this way, lifetimes are not isolated experiences, but chapters in a much longer story of growth. You might arrive in one life with a gift for music, or a deep empathy for others, without understanding exactly why. These are the echoes of what you've learned before. Likewise, persistent fears or difficult patterns might not originate in your current lifetime at all. They may be the unfinished work of earlier lives, waiting for resolution. The idea of Earth as a school can be comforting. It frames pain and struggle not as punishment, but as opportunities for expansion. When you fail, it's not the end, it's a chance to try again. When you succeed, it's not luck, it's the result of integrating wisdom through experience. You are not trapped in a meaningless cycle, but participating in a purposeful progression toward greater awareness. Every teacher knows that the most lasting learning often comes through trial and error, and in this model, the universe operates by the same principle. And yet, this theory has its critiques. One question often raised is, if this is a school, who designed it? Is there a benevolent intelligence overseeing the curriculum, or is it an impersonal system of growth? Some worry that the school metaphor can be used to justify suffering, as if every tragedy is just a lesson you needed, regardless of its severity. This can lead to spiritual bypassing, where people downplay or dismiss the real impact of pain by reframing it as a necessary assignment. Others question whether the constant need for re-enrollment means the system is designed for endless repetition rather than true graduation. If souls keep returning over and over, is that because the lessons are genuinely infinite, or because the classroom is built to keep them inside? Another challenge to this model is that not everyone remembers the syllabus. Most people live without conscious access to any pre-birth agreements they might have made. Without that awareness, the lessons can feel arbitrary and cruel, and the idea of them being self-chosen can be difficult to accept. If you chose a life of hardship to develop certain qualities, why wouldn't you remember making that choice? Advocates of the theory say the forgetting is intentional, like entering a test without knowing the answers in advance, so your learning is authentic and not just rehearsed. But for some, this feels like an unnecessary handicap that undermines the whole point of the school. Still, many find deep meaning in approaching life this way. Seeing every challenge as a potential lesson changes how you meet it. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What can I learn from this?" That shift in perspective can dissolve resentment and open the door to growth in ways that victimhood never could. It also encourages compassion for others. If you see everyone around you as a fellow student, each working on their own assignments, it becomes easier to forgive mistakes and to support each other's progress. You recognize that no one is ahead or behind in absolute terms. Each person is simply navigating the unique curriculum they chose for themselves. In this vision, death is never a failure. Even if you leave a life with unfinished work, you carry forward everything you've gained. The soul doesn't fail the course. It simply continues learning in a new form, with new conditions, perhaps even in a completely different world. Those who graduate from Earth might go on to other realms with different challenges and opportunities, expanding their awareness in ways that aren't possible here. Those who return do so with the possibility of integrating their lessons more deeply next time, armed with the subtle memory of what they've already faced. What makes the soul school theory so enduring is its ability to weave purpose into the fabric of daily life. It reassures you that even the most difficult experiences have value, that no effort is wasted, and that the journey is bigger than any single lifetime. It invites you to see yourself not as a victim of random events, but as an active participant in your own evolution. You are both student and teacher, learning from your circumstances while also shaping them through your choices. And when the time comes to step beyond this life, you'll do so not as someone who is finished, but as someone who has completed one stage and is ready for whatever comes next. Whether you see that next step as a graduation or a return to the classroom, the soul school theory insists that your journey is far from over, and that every page of it, no matter how challenging, is worth reading. There is a theory about life and death so unsettling that many dismiss it outright, not because it lacks coherence, but because of what it implies about the very fabric of existence. It suggests that Earth is not the open, neutral playing field we imagine it to be, but a closed system, a kind of spiritual trap designed to keep souls bound in a cycle of reincarnation, for purposes that have nothing to do with growth or learning. In this view, death is not a natural liberation of consciousness, but the first step in a carefully orchestrated process of capture, recycling, and return. You do not ascend to a higher plane because forces exist that make sure you do not. These forces, whether thought of as astral predators, artificial intelligences, or something else entirely, harvest the emotional and psychic energy of incarnated beings as a kind of currency, sustaining themselves through the very essence of human experience. The prison planet hypothesis begins with the observation that reincarnation, in its ideal form, should be a choice. A soul should return because it wishes to explore more, to resolve unfinished lessons, or to contribute to the unfolding of life. Yet, according to this theory, the reincarnation system on Earth has been hijacked. Instead of returning by choice, most souls are drawn back in by an elaborate system of illusions and manipulation. At death, the newly freed consciousness is met not by the open expanse of infinite realms, but by a kind of containment field on the astral plane. Here, familiar images and beings may appear, long-lost relatives, religious figures, or radiant lights that seem impossibly welcoming. The dying person feels safe, comforted, and drawn forward. But according to this hypothesis, this is the bait. The moment you step into that light or surrender fully to those figures, the cycle begins again. In this model, the entities orchestrating the system are not compassionate guides but keepers of the loop. They have no interest in your freedom because your continued incarnation benefits them. What they gain is not simply your physical labor or societal compliance, but the raw, potent energy generated by human emotion. Fear, grief, rage, longing, even ecstatic joy, all of these produce a vibrational signature that can be harvested and consumed. The more intense the emotion, the more valuable the energy. In this sense, the events of life, wars, tragedies, personal heartbreaks, are not just byproducts of an imperfect world, but deliberate generators of this currency. The harvesting process is said to happen primarily in the astral layers closest to Earth, where predatory consciousness forms feed on the emotional residue of the living and the newly dead. Some describe these entities as parasitic in nature, attaching themselves to the human energy field during life and maintaining influence after death. Others depict them as architects of the entire system, capable of creating vast illusions to keep souls from recognizing their true state. In either case, the result is the same, a closed-loop reincarnation cycle that funnels energy upward and keeps awareness locked in a kind of cosmic amnesia. Artificial reincarnation, as it's described in this theory, relies heavily on deception. The moment of death is disorienting. Without the anchor of the body, your sense of time and space dissolves. In this vulnerable state, your perception is easily shaped by external forces. By presenting you with images that align with your deepest beliefs, the heaven you were promised, the loved ones you miss, the deities you've worshipped, these controllers create a reality you will willingly step into. Once inside, you are processed in ways that erase the memory of what came before, then sent back into physical form with a blank slate, repeating the cycle without knowing you've walked it countless times before. One of the most disturbing implications of this theory is that suffering itself is not just a natural consequence of human life, but a resource being cultivated. When you experience pain, loss, or fear, the emotional energy released is, in this framework, the product being harvested. This reframes many of the world's ongoing crises, not as unfortunate accidents of history, but as deliberate strategies to keep humanity in a state of emotional volatility. This also explains why, in this model, enlightenment or liberation is discouraged by the system. A soul that awakens to its true nature stops generating the same kind of harvestable energy and becomes far harder to recycle. Yet even in the prison planet hypothesis, there are those who escape. Spiritual sovereignty, the conscious reclamation of your own awareness and choices, is the key. This means recognizing the manipulation for what it is, and refusing to participate in the illusions that bind you. In practical terms, it involves training yourself, while still alive, to navigate altered states of consciousness without being swayed by appearances. It means learning to maintain awareness and intention even in the most overwhelming emotional states. It also means cultivating a deep understanding of your own energy field so that you can detect and remove parasitic influences before they can anchor themselves to you. Many who accept this theory believe the escape route lies in bypassing the familiar post-death light entirely. Instead of moving toward whatever appears at the moment of death, they suggest turning inward, centering awareness in the heart or core of being, and refusing to be drawn anywhere. In this stillness, it is said, the false constructs dissolve, revealing paths beyond the containment field. These paths do not lead to another reincarnation cycle but to realms beyond the control of the system, where the soul can rest, explore, or continue evolving without interference. The prison planet idea shares elements with ancient Gnostic thought, which held that the material world was the creation of a false god or demiurge who trapped divine sparks in human bodies. Freedom came not from serving this world's rulers but from awakening to one's true divine origin and breaking the cycle. Similar ideas appear in some Tibetan Buddhist interpretations, where the bardos between death and rebirth are filled with illusions that can bind the unprepared soul to another round of existence. In these traditions, liberation requires vigilance, clarity, and the ability to recognize the unreal as unreal. The emotional impact of believing in such a system can be intense. It challenges not only comforting religious narratives, but also the idea that the universe is fundamentally benevolent. Yet for some, this theory does not inspire despair but determination. If the prison is real, then the work of spiritual life becomes not just about personal peace, but about dismantling the chains for yourself and others. It reframes practices like meditation, lucid dreaming, energy clearing, and deep shadow work as acts of resistance against a hidden machinery of control. There are also those who suggest that the prison planet system, if it exists, is weakening. Rising awareness, greater access to spiritual knowledge, and the collective questioning of authority in all forms may be eroding the illusions that keep souls compliant. If enough people awaken in life to their true nature, the post-death manipulations may lose their power, and the cycle could break not just for individuals but for the species as a whole. In the end, whether the prison planet hypothesis is literal truth or a metaphor for the ways human consciousness can be trapped, its core message remains the same. Your freedom depends on your awareness. If your choices in life are guided by fear, manipulation, and unquestioned belief, you are easier to control both here and beyond. But if you claim your sovereignty, if you train yourself to see through appearances and act from the center of your being, then even the most elaborate systems of control lose their hold. And so, in this view, the real question is not whether the prison exists, but whether you will be ready to walk past its gates when the moment comes. Will you be pulled into the familiar comfort of the light, the voices, the promises you've been conditioned to trust? Or will you stand in stillness, see the trap for what it is, and step into the unknown with your awareness intact? In the prison planet hypothesis, that choice is the difference between another lifetime of forgetfulness and the final reclaiming of your freedom. You have been taught to see death as the final stop, the point where everything you are collapses into nothing. The body goes cold, the mind goes silent, and existence itself seems to fade into a void. But what if that perception is built on a misunderstanding of reality? The law of conservation of energy tells us that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every thought is driven by energy moving through you. If that principle holds true, then when you die, the animating force within you doesn't vanish. It transforms. The body you've been wearing will return to the earth, becoming part of the soil, the air, the water. And the awareness that has been experiencing life through that body may shift into a form you cannot yet imagine. Science has long recognized that matter itself is not as solid as it appears. At the smallest levels, it's patterns of energy, vibrations in fields, organized into the illusion of solidity by the rules of this universe. Consciousness, though still a mystery to physics, may be another form of this energy, one that doesn't require a brain to exist. If the mind is more like a radio receiver than a generator, then death might simply be the moment the receiver breaks. The signal doesn't stop, it just stops coming through that particular channel. Your awareness continues, but the interface you've been using to interact with this world is gone. Near-death experiences often seem to support this idea of continuity. People who have been clinically dead for minutes, sometimes hours, return with vivid, structured memories of events that occurred while their bodies were unresponsive. They describe seeing from perspectives far outside their physical senses, moving through realms of light, or experiencing a clarity of thought and perception far greater than anything they knew while alive. These accounts suggest that whatever consciousness is, it is not confined to the body. It is capable of existing independently, retaining memory, identity, and even the ability to make choices. If you accept that energy transforms, rather than disappears, the fear of death begins to lose some of its grip. What you fear is not transformation, but the unknown. You fear the loss of what is familiar, the taste of food, the sound of laughter, the faces you've loved. But if your awareness continues, then death is not an erasure of these things, but a shift into another way of perceiving them. Just as a caterpillar may not be able to imagine the life of a butterfly, you may not be able to fully picture what awareness is like without a body. That doesn't mean it's an absence. It may be a greater presence than anything you've ever known. There's a kind of freedom that comes with seeing death this way. If nothing essential is lost, then life is not a desperate scramble to make the most of a fleeting moment before the curtain falls. It becomes a chapter in a much larger book, one that continues beyond the last page you can see. The ending of a chapter is not the end of the story, it's the doorway to the next. And if you've ever finished a book that left you changed, you know that the value wasn't in holding on to each word forever, but in letting the story move you, shape you, and then move on. Understanding death as transformation can also deepen your sense of connection to everything around you. If the energy that animates you is the same energy that animates the stars, the trees, the oceans, then your ending is really just a redistribution of that energy into new forms. The atoms in your body once belonged to other beings, ancient forests, long extinct creatures, even the hearts of stars that exploded billions of years ago. You are not a separate, isolated entity. You are a temporary arrangement of universal material, woven together for a time to have the experience of being you. When this arrangement dissolves, the elements return to the greater whole, ready to be part of something else. This perspective doesn't diminish the uniqueness of your life, it enhances it. Knowing that you are a momentary expression of something eternal can make each moment richer, not more disposable. You stop clinging to the idea of permanence, and instead embrace the reality of flow. You realize that even now, you are constantly transforming, cells dying and regenerating, thoughts arising and fading, emotions shifting from one state to another. Death is simply the largest of these transformations, the final shedding of a form that was never meant to last forever. Some near-death experiencers describe the transition as being like waking from a dream. They say that in that moment, everything makes sense in a way it never could while they were alive. The struggles, the losses, even the pain is seen in a larger context, as part of a process they now understand and accept. The fear that once seemed so overwhelming dissolves into a kind of peaceful recognition. They have not stopped existing, they have simply changed states. And often, they return to life with a profound shift in values, placing far less importance on material success or social approval, and far more on love, connection, and authenticity. If death is transformation, then perhaps it is not something to be fought at all costs, but something to be met consciously. This doesn't mean seeking it before its time, but preparing for it as you would for any important journey. You can choose to live in a way that lessens your fear of leaving, by focusing on what will matter beyond the end of this particular life, the relationships you've nurtured, the growth you've achieved, the awareness you've cultivated. You can learn to see yourself not as a body with a consciousness, but as consciousness with a body, temporarily exploring this corner of the universe. When you adopt this view, the urgency to beat death fades. You realize there's nothing to beat. The cycle of birth and death is part of the same ongoing process that moves galaxies and grows trees. You may not know exactly what form you will take after this, but you can trust that you will take some form, because you always have. You have been water, rock, air, flame. You have been creature and plant, seed and soil. This life is one more expression, and when it ends, the energy will continue to flow. Even the grief of losing others shifts in this light. You may still miss their physical presence, but you can also sense that they have not been erased, they've simply moved into another form of existence. Sometimes you may even feel them, in moments of stillness or in dreams, as if their awareness brushes against yours from beyond the limits of your current perception. And perhaps, when your own transformation comes, you will find them again in whatever new form your awareness takes. The fear of death has been a powerful force throughout human history, shaping entire cultures, religions, and ways of life. But if death is simply transformation, then that fear loses much of its power. What remains is not dread, but curiosity. What will it be like to shed this body, to see without eyes, to exist without the weight of flesh? What new landscapes will open? What new ways of being will reveal themselves? You don't have to have the answers now. You only have to trust that the same force that brought you into this life will carry you into the next state, just as it always has. In the end, you are not heading toward a void. You are heading toward a change, a continuation in another form, another mode of awareness. And when the moment comes, you may find that it is less like falling into darkness and more like stepping into a greater light, a light you have always been part of and will always be part of, no matter how many forms you take. Across the span of human history, cultures have treated death not as an abstract fear to be avoided, but as a skill to be learned, a passage that can be prepared for as deliberately as one might prepare for a great journey. In this view, the moment of death is not the end, but a crossing, and the state of mind you carry into that crossing determines where you arrive. Ancient traditions held that to enter this passage unprepared was to risk confusion, disorientation, and entanglement in realms you did not intend to enter. But to approach it with training, clarity, and purpose was to open the way to liberation, wisdom, or the reunion with your true home. The Tibetan Buddhist teachings of the Bardo are perhaps the most detailed map of this process. In this tradition, death is not a single instant, but a series of dissolutions, the gradual unbinding of the physical elements, the senses, and finally, the mind itself. Practitioners train for this moment throughout life by learning to maintain awareness in deep meditation, in lucid dreaming, and in altered states of consciousness. They memorize the stages of the bardo so that when visions and sensations arise after death, whether blissful or terrifying, they recognize them as projections of their own mind. The goal is not to be drawn toward or repelled by anything that appears, but to remain centered in the luminous awareness that is their true nature. In this stillness, the opportunity for final liberation opens, before the pull of another birth takes hold. The ancient Egyptians, too, approached death as a passage requiring skill. Their funerary texts, often called the Book of the Dead, though the original title meant something closer to the Book of Going Forth by Day, were not superstitious spells but detailed guides for the soul. They described the landscape beyond death as filled with gates, guardians, and tests of the heart. A soul that entered unprepared could become lost, trapped, or devoured by its own shadow. But one who knew the right words, the right symbols, and the right truths could pass through unscathed. These were not simply instructions for the afterlife, but for life itself, a reminder that every choice you make now shapes the form you will carry when you step beyond the body. In Hermetic and mystery school traditions, the idea of conscious death was woven into initiations. Symbolic deaths in ritual allowed initiates to experience the dissolution of self in a controlled setting, to face the stripping away of identity and attachment before the real moment came. The teaching was that the fear of death comes from clinging to the temporary, and that by repeatedly letting go in life, in meditation, in vision quests, in ritual, one could enter death as one might step through a doorway, without resistance. Here too, the emphasis was on training the mind to remain sovereign, to avoid being pulled into the hypnotic lures of the lower realms, and to follow the inner compass that points to higher states. All of these traditions understood that clarity at the moment of death is everything. In life, you can be distracted, scattered, even forgetful, and still find your way forward eventually. But in the liminal state after death, thought and reality are one and the same. A single impulse of fear can conjure a prison. A single longing can bind you to a place you did not intend to stay. If you meet that moment with a mind trained to recognize illusion, to stay steady no matter what appears, then the landscapes that rise before you cannot entrap you. This is why death preparation is not about memorizing instructions alone, but about embodying a state of awareness that no force can shake. Avoiding external lures is a core teaching in nearly every conscious death tradition. The appearances that greet you after the body falls away may feel more vivid than anything in physical life. They may take the shape of beloved relatives, radiant beings of light, or paradises that match your deepest desires. The danger lies not in their existence, but in mistaking them for ultimate truth. If they are genuine, they will not demand your surrender. If they are traps, they will press you to merge with them immediately, to follow without question. The training is to pause, to hold your center, and to ask inwardly whether the path before you aligns with the deepest recognition of your own being. This inner guidance is subtle but unmistakable when you have cultivated the ability to hear it. Meditation is one of the most powerful tools for this preparation, because it teaches you to witness thoughts and sensations without being pulled into them. In long practice, you become familiar with the mind's tricks, its habits of chasing pleasure and fleeing discomfort. You learn that awareness is not the thoughts themselves, but the space in which they arise. This same recognition, carried into death, allows you to move through any realm without losing yourself to its pull. The practice of meditation also quiets the turbulence of the mind, making it easier to perceive the guidance that comes from beyond the layers of personal identity. Lucid dreaming is another essential form of training, because the dream state shares much in common with the post-death state. In dreams, as in death, the environment is shaped by thought and emotion. A lucid dreamer learns to navigate this landscape consciously, to change it at will, to face challenges directly, to remain calm in the presence of the unfamiliar. By practicing lucidity in dreams, you are rehearsing for lucidity in death, where the stakes are far greater and the landscapes infinitely more varied. Astral travel extends this preparation further, as it involves leaving the physical body behind while retaining full consciousness. In this state, you may encounter beings, realms, and scenarios that test your discernment. You learn to maintain your own energy, to recognize when something is trying to influence or siphon from you, and to move intentionally toward the realms that align with your highest vibration. Over time, this builds a confidence that carries directly into the transition of death, where similar skills are needed to navigate the unfamiliar. The key in all of these practices is to make them habitual, so that the skills become second nature. At the moment of death, you will not have the luxury of starting from scratch. The body will be falling away, the senses dissolving, and the pull of other realms already beginning. What remains steady is what you have embodied again and again in life: the ability to hold your awareness in the midst of change, to recognize the difference between truth and illusion, and to follow the inner current that leads you where you truly wish to go. Death preparation is not about trying to control the journey in a rigid way. It is about cultivating the flexibility and sovereignty to meet whatever arises without being swept away. It is about clearing the emotional and energetic baggage that can pull you toward lower realms, and strengthening the connection to the parts of yourself that exist beyond personality and form. It is about remembering, at the deepest level, that you are not the body, not the mind, and not even the identity you've worn for this lifetime, but the awareness in which all of it has unfolded. When the moment comes, all the outer forms of preparation, the texts, the rituals, the visualizations, will fall away. What will remain is the essence you have cultivated. If you have practiced seeing through illusion, you will not be fooled by the appearances that greet you. If you have practiced stillness, you will not be rushed into choices you do not wish to make. If you have practiced listening inwardly, you will recognize the path that leads beyond the familiar cycles into the freedom that has always been your birthright. And in that moment, death will not feel like an ending at all, but like the most natural step in a journey you have been preparing for all along. At the heart of every afterlife theory, beneath the details and disagreements, lies a single, unshakable truth: awareness is everything. Whether you believe death is a doorway to a higher dimension, a return to the source, a shift into a parallel reality, or simply a continuation of the consciousness you've always had, the common thread is that what you experience next is shaped by what you are aware of in that moment. Awareness is not just the passive act of noticing, it is the most active force you possess. It is the light you shine into the unknown, the compass you carry when all other maps dissolve. And death, in many ways, may be the most conscious moment of your existence. In life, awareness is often fragmented. Your attention is split between the demands of the day, the noise of the world, and the constant stream of thoughts pulling you into the past or future. But death strips away everything that scatters your focus. The body's weight falls away, the roles you've been playing dissolve, the countless distractions that filled your days are gone. What remains is the pure, unfiltered presence of your own being. In that space, you are more awake than you have ever been, because you can no longer hide from yourself. The illusions you've clung to can't follow you. The truths you've avoided stand clear in front of you, and you are left with the essence of who you are. It is here, in this moment of unshakable awareness, that the choice point reveals itself. You may be presented with visions, landscapes, guides, or even invitations to return. You might see a tunnel of light, a field of endless stars, or entirely different worlds waiting to be explored. But these are not just destinations handed to you. They are mirrors, reflecting the state of your own awareness back to you. If you meet this moment clouded with fear, confusion, or denial, your choices will be shaped by them. If you meet it with clarity, acceptance, and a willingness to step into the unknown, entirely different doors will open. This is why so many spiritual traditions emphasize preparing for death while you are still alive. It's not morbid, it's practical. You practice awareness now so that when the moment comes, you will not be swept away by fear or seduced by illusions. You learn to center yourself in stillness so that you can see through appearances to the truth behind them. You train yourself to recognize what is real so that when the choice point appears, you can choose from the deepest part of your being rather than from the automatic habits of the mind. The truth is, you have already been making these choices every day of your life. Every time you decide to face something honestly rather than avoid it, you are practicing for the choice point. Every time you let love guide your actions instead of fear, you are rehearsing the kind of awareness that will serve you when this body is gone. Death doesn't create the awareness you will carry into what comes next, it reveals it. The state you are in now is the state you will bring with you. That is why your role in shaping what happens after death is far greater than you might think. Some believe that the afterlife is predetermined, that you will be guided along a set path no matter what. But what if it's more interactive than that? What if the entire landscape of your next experience is sculpted in real time by your awareness? If that's true, then you are not just a passenger on the journey, you are a co-creator. You have the power to choose whether you return to another life, merge into the infinite, explore new realms, or even craft a reality of your own design. But that power depends entirely on your ability to remain conscious when the familiar world falls away. Near-death experiences often describe a moment of decision, a point where they were given a choice to return or to continue on. Some speak of a loving presence encouraging them to stay, others of unfinished business pulling them back. In each case, the choice was not random. It reflected their awareness in that moment, their priorities, their attachments, their readiness. The choice point is not a test imposed from outside, but a mirror that responds to the deepest truths of your being, and that means you can begin shaping that moment now, in the way you live today. Living with this understanding changes everything. Suddenly, your everyday actions are not just about survival, success, or comfort. They are training for the most important moment you will ever face. Every argument you resolve with compassion instead of resentment strengthens your awareness. Every fear you confront instead of fleeing builds your capacity to meet the unknown with steadiness. Every time you align your choices with what you know is true for you, no matter the cost, you are preparing for the moment when all that will remain is your truth. It also strips away the false urgency that drives so much of human life. If awareness is the real currency you carry beyond death, then the frantic chase for material gain or social status loses its grip. You start asking different questions. Am I living in alignment with what I know to be real? Am I cultivating the kind of awareness I would want to bring into the moment I leave this body? Am I building the inner clarity that will let me choose freely when the choice point arrives? The challenge, of course, is that it's easy to forget this perspective when you are caught up in the day-to-day pull of life, but remembering it changes how you move through the world. You begin to see every interaction, every challenge, as part of your preparation. You stop wasting energy on things that cloud your awareness, grudges, regrets, self-deception, and instead focus on what clears your perception. You realize that the most valuable skill you can develop is the ability to remain fully present, no matter what is happening around you. And so the choice point is not just a moment after death, it's a moment available to you right now. Every decision you make is a smaller version of it. You are constantly standing at intersections where you can choose between awareness and unconsciousness, between clarity and illusion, between love and fear. The more often you choose awareness now, the more naturally you will choose it then. This is where the challenge comes in. If death is the most conscious moment of your existence, and if what comes next is shaped by the awareness you carry into it, then how are you living today? Are you moving toward that moment with clarity, or are you letting the noise of life dull your perception? Are you cultivating the ability to meet the unknown with trust, or are you reinforcing patterns of fear that will pull you toward the safest, most familiar option, even if it's not what your soul truly wants? The truth is, you don't have to wait until your final breath to stand at the choice point. You can practice it every time you decide to tell the truth, to act with integrity, to let go of what no longer serves you. You can make it a way of life, so that when the ultimate moment arrives, you recognize it not as something foreign, but as the natural culmination of the way you have been living all along. One day, you will arrive at that moment. The world as you know it will dissolve, and you will stand in the purest awareness you have ever known. And in that moment, you will choose, not based on wishful thinking, but from the truth you have cultivated within yourself over a lifetime. So the question is not just, what will you choose then, but what are you choosing now? Because in the end, they are the same question. And the answer is being written in every breath you take, every thought you nurture, and every step you choose to walk in this life.